Tonight, we won't follow parades or read speeches from red banners. Instead, we'll step quietly into an apartment block where walls remember every kettle sigh. Here, life unfolds at the pace of steam. A stairwell light blinks awake, and someone's slippers shuffle past like a thought half remembered. You hear the hum of a samovar, the creak of pipes behind painted plaster, the faint rhythm of a radio announcing tomorrow's weather as though it were a promise. Outside, trains slide through snow like sentences written without hurry. Inside, kitchens trade stories for sugar cubes, and neighbors keep time by the sound of each other's doors. The air smells faintly of boiled tea, printer ink, and winter cloth just beginning to thaw. Nothing grand happens here, only the choreography of ordinary life. A coat hung to dry, a letter steamed open, a song hummed softly because silence always needs company. So lower the lights, let the small noises find their pattern. And if quiet routines like this one slow your heartbeat just enough to match the rhythm of a kettle cooling, that's already enough to belong here. And somewhere between the hiss of the kettle and the hum of a stairwell lamp, the idea of order changes its clothes. It stops wearing golden feathers and starts wearing factory dust, ration books, and the soft echo of a shared hallway. Rules still keep the world turning, only now they hum through radiators and stamped papers, through names printed in ledgers instead of carved in stone. In this new silence, a nation learns to live between the tick of a boiler and the sigh of a train. Doors open, lights flicker, and another kind of truth begins. Not weighed on scales, but measured in cups of tea and borrowed sugar. In the low hum of a stairwell, a kettle begins to think out loud. Its whistle doesn't rush, it lingers, sharing the rhythm of 1,000 evenings spent waiting for water to calm itself. The stairwell light blinks awake, and echoes take their time deciding which direction to travel. Someone's footsteps move through the corridor like punctuation, careful not to disturb the meaning of the walls. A teacup waits by the window, gathering the day's dust and a little reflected snow. In these narrow spaces, life learns to balance itself between warmth and habit, between silence and the sound of another key turning in the lock. Every object earns a role, a kettle that marks time better than a clock, a rug that keeps the neighbors' arguments from spilling through the floor, a window that frames just enough sky to remind you it still exists. Nothing dramatic happens here, but if you listen long enough, the radiators begin to breathe in unison and the whole building exhales. Low doors open onto a long corridor. It smells faintly of boiled potatoes, floor wax, and coal dust that will never quite surrender the corners. This is a communalka, a communal apartment where families possess rooms but share the rest, a kind of indoor village conducted in slippers. Locks matter less than etiquette, so territories are drawn with braided clotheslines that sag like tired sentences. This hook for room 4, that shelf for room 2, the fire burner for whoever is making cabbage soup with dill today. A teapot lives on a tray that can cross frontiers without incident, because a tray signals neutrality. You can tell how long a household has resided here by the thickness of its chopping board and the confidence with which its pan claims a place on the stove. The bathroom has an appointment schedule that runs like a train timetable, with one recurring delay marked hot water, which is less a utility than a visiting cousin welcome, erratic, discussed at length. Later decades pass, and the corridor thins into a new flat of one's own. A Khrushchevka with walls so slim a neighbor's sneeze rounds off your sentences. It is still progress. There is a real door hinged to close, and a whole family can discuss where to place the rug that quiets the radio from next door. The rug is a negotiator. It performs exactly the work that a treaty hopes to do: absorb noise without appearing to mind. Movement, meanwhile, is not just about buses or tracks, but ink. An internal passport stamps your permission to live and work in a particular place. And that stamp is called propite, the kind of word that looks properly bureaucratic even before you understand it. The propiska goes wherever you go in the way a shadow does, quietly, continually, not always noticed until you bump into a clerk. Addresses are earned by lines of type. Waiting lists ripen like summer fruit, except on paper, so their seasons are measured by school years and birthdays rather than months. A marriage can merge square meters as efficiently as it merges surnames, and a job assignment can unlock a room that would not otherwise exist. Much as a chess move opens a line on the board, a folding table by the window makes the space official. A potted geranium draws a border kinder than any fence. If a radio sits low, it is not only because the reception is best near the outlet, but because voices sound calmer at the level of slippers. One learns that privacy is not a fortress, but a shape you make. 2 chairs angled, a kettle humming, a notebook turned, so the pencil has somewhere polite to land. A person can be at home without being alone, which is nice until onions are chopped enthusiastically within the same oxygen. Daylight rings a bell, and the morning begins with confidence. Whistles mark the shift. The wall clock is someone's stern aunt who keeps everyone punctual whether they want to be or not. Standards called GOST explain the measurements of screws and the opinions of compasses. So you can trust a bolt to fit its nut the way you trust rye bread to look reliable at every counter. Tools are shared like stories. This is the good hammer. It knows what it's doing. Subotnik Saturday softens the week's edges. People sweep courtyards, paint fences, and repair benches with a civic optimism that tastes faintly of chalk dust. Pay turns up when it should in rubles, and also when it shouldn't have to, which is to say in kind, boots for an apprentice who needs them, a voucher for a holiday sanatorium, sausage that arrives like an apology for inflation. Skill is a quiet metal. The city admires a lathe operator with hands that cut steel as straight as thought, a chemist who keeps a reactor bored, a tram driver who knows how to brake so gently that old ladies nod without waking. None of them is famous. All of them are necessary. On good days, necessity is its own applause. Shopping is not a solitary sport, but an urban folk dance whose first step is to find the end of the line. A state store opens at 9, but the queue has been rehearsing since 8, warm with speculation. What are we queuing for? Is not a question so much as a community thesis. Rumor suggests sausage, rumor denies sausage, rumor settles on dried pasta understudied by toothpaste. An avoska, a string bag with the cheerful modesty of a net used by butterflies, lives in a pocket just in case something suddenly exists. Coupons called talony appear and disappear like migratory birds that only officials can predict. Empty jars are carried for bulk goods because the respectable thing to do is to be ready for sugar. Queues become social networks before anyone could define the term. A place in line can be held by a neighbor while you fetch your child, and if you leave to check another store, your scarf marks your return like a small polite flag. If the shelves are bare, conversation stalks the room. A new film, someone's son in the army, a rumor about oranges at the big shop by the tram loop. The etiquette of scarcity is simple, which is to say complicated. Take the last 2 only if you will cook both tonight. Offer to swap a jar of jam for someone's yeast. Do not gloat over tangerines. The clerk's rubber stamp clacks with the authority of a minor planet. It is also thoroughly ordinary that it memorizes you. Evening returns everyone to kitchens that serve as parliaments with enamel walls. A table with oilcloth entertains birthdays, debates, and nursery rhymes without changing its expression. 4 burners culture a rotation worthy of a chess clock. Salad Olivier waits in a large bowl like a friendly algorithm. Diced potato, diced carrot, peas, pickles, bologna, mayonnaise. It is a recipe, but also a memory device. The windowsill lines up jars of pickles with the accuracy of a parade. Tea black and loyal to its work sits in faceted glasses with metal pots de kaniki that make the tea look like an engineer. Toasts proceed in a slow, rational order, often beginning with health, and traveling out toward the health of trains, for trains keep their schedules as families keep theirs. Soft favors called Black connect small needs to small solutions. A friend of a friend knows a dentist who can see you a week earlier if you bring coffee beans that came home in somebody's suitcase. None of this is bribery. It is lubrication as useful for hinges as for jobs. Between the lullaby and the news broadcast, the television supplies two channels of comfort. A holiday film reappears annually and is quoted as if it were a relative. People recite the lines while chopping salad, which is a form of devotion superior to applause. But the night is generous and holds other narratives too, the ones that are typed quietly. Samizdat is literature that behaves like a secret. Pages are onion-skin thin, a carbon paper ghost of the original, folded into a pocket that belongs to a friend who promises to read in return. The text travels like a visiting tea bag, steeped briefly in many kitchens. To read is an act of attention, and attention is citizenship practiced at a small table under a 30-watt bulb. Cassettes with magnetized music pass from hand to hand, acquiring a little hiss each time they make someone happy. The morning after, no one announces anything. That is the point. Meaning moves along the between lines where radio waves cannot follow, a territory both safe and slightly absurd, like whispering the punchline of a joke that was never told. Trains stitch the city to itself at night. They hum with the patient rhythm of a machine that knows it will win, not because it is fast, but because it refuses to be excited. In the dining car, a samovar exhales the kind of steam that straightens shoulders. Tea is poured and then steadied against the sway with a small practice tilt. Summer turns attention toward the dasha, and seedlings crowd a windowsill in March, like polite children waiting to go outside. By July, those seedlings become tomatoes that require serious jars, basil that pretends to be from warmer places, and mushroom maps that will not be drawn for outsiders. The sanatorium wait is a particular kind of hope. A voucher earned through work promises pine air, mineral water, prescribed rest, and lectures about posture. A person travels to a holiday that looks like a pamphlet and returns with cheeks that believe in circulation. Winter supplies its own curriculum. The Banya's steam edits the week. Birch switches open the pores like stern teachers opening textbooks. Felt hats do their odd mathematics on heat exchange, which is the sort of science you trust once you have tried it once. Outside, frost draws geometry on windows that no one paid for. People cover radiators with drying socks in a very narrow field of engineering which calculates the heat of damp wool. On holidays, the calendar is quietly theatrical. Children's red kerchiefs for the pioneers tie themselves to memories that will never untie. Later, Komsomol badges open projects the way a conductor opens a symphony by pretending the music already exists and only needs a hand. Victory Day brings medals out of drawers and puts shoulders back without speeches. On May Day, feet remember exactly how tiring optimism can be. New Year's, the true private monarch of holidays, sets a pine tree in the corner, balances tangerines on plates, and invites dead Moros to knock softly at the door while someone lights sparklers that smell gently of wire. Gifts are modest on purpose. More than one person remembers the year a new towel felt like a sunrise. Travel inward is as common as travel outward. Bookshelves tilt with the weight of complete works, not because they are read every week, but because they prove that long sentences exist. Chessboards keep their own weather. Clocks tick in stern duet while a bishop works patiently at the concept of diagonals. In a city library, the card catalog stretches like a rail yard, every drawer a platform, and every card a destination. A person goes to the desk and requests an author with a name whose consonants fit together like gears. The librarian makes a stamped sound that turns the whole errand into an institution. On park benches, old men and pigeons develop a meaningful alliance. Bread is flung with accuracy. Cooing is provided. Time passes with dignity. Newspapers are folded into quarters that fit the human hand. The crossword puzzle mutters to itself in squares. Even a queue has a geometry worth teaching. The angle formed by two friends who meet while standing there can be measured with a protractor one would normally reserve for school. If someone tries to cut ahead, the reprimand is formal but not unkind. A raised eyebrow does the work of a gate. A piece of gossip takes 3 minutes to move from back to front, provided it is a cheerful kind. The less cheerful kind travels slower, as if its shoes are heavier. When a shipment arrives, a crate of Bulgarian peppers, a coil of hose, a stack of enamel basins, the crowd flows forward, not like a flood, but like a very well-behaved tide. In this choreography, the clerk is both lighthouse and customs officer. Receipts collect in pockets where laundry will later discover them and wonder what they ever purchased. At home, sugar is poured into a jar, labeled with tape, and placed next to 2 other jars of sugar because rumor can be surprisingly accurate. The city closes its eyes politely. Radiators ping like distant typewriters correcting themselves. Somewhere, a kettle reaches the small, satisfied boil that promises tea for whoever is still awake. Somewhere else, a tram brakes so gently that the passengers sway without noticing. In the courtyard, bicycles lean against stairs that seem to wait for tomorrow. A cat walks the fence as if inspecting a border in need of very small improvements. Snow, when present, snaps underfoot with the sound of bread crust. Inside a one-room flat, the rug does its quiet work, and the folding table maintains the jurisdiction it has claimed by the window. The internal passport rests in a drawer like a bird sleeping in a shoebox. On the sill, a jar of pickles supervises the night shift. There is no lesson, except maybe this. A life can be organized by cups, and schedules without becoming mechanical. And a country can be understood by the way a neighbor saves your place while you fetch a spoon. If you're still listening, you may keep listening because the kettle will be ready in a moment. And there was also something to say about the correct way to store felt boots, so they do not forget their shape. It is simple. Stuff them with newspaper, fold them like an opinion you plan to keep, and leave them beside the radiator until morning, which will arrive, punctual and unhurried, like a train entering a warm station. You might not expect a hallway to have a personality, or a kettle to keep a family's calendar, but in the Soviet Union, both of these were reliable civil servants. The hallway knew which doors creaked like old violin strings, and which slippers belonged, to which apartment, and the kettle remembered when the neighbor's son came back from night shift, because it whistled at exactly the same gentle minute. If you were still awake by the time we reach the matter of Q arithmetic, how 5 people can become 9 without anyone moving, feel free to subscribe, or simply promise the thought to yourself and misplace it as one misplaces a sock. Tonight we'll drift through the soft geography of daily life, where a wall clock is the loudest politician in the room, and a jar of pickles supervises negotiations from the windowsill with briny calm. A door opens not into a room, but into a corridor that has been polished by decades of elbows, coats, and careful rushing. This is the communalka, where the word apartment means together but with labels. The shared kitchen hosts a carnival of name tags. A teacup that says room 6, a saucepan that says don't burn, and a sugar jar that says nothing because everyone already knows whose it is. Borders are drawn with braided clothesline, more symbolic than secure, fluttering like a diplomatic flag between hooks. On the stove's 4 burners, thyme sliced like cake. 7 to 8 is porridge for room 3. 8 to 9 is fried potatoes for room 1. 9 to eternally, 9:30, is the burner that never heats properly and therefore belongs to no one. In the bathroom, the schedule is a masterpiece of cartography, crossed out names like abandoned rail lines, new routes penciled in, and a recurring public holiday labeled hot water. That arrives unannounced and is celebrated with buckets. Yet the corridor has its own kindness. A pot of soup is set to simmer and somehow simmers for everyone. A child learns to knock before memory forms. A radio whispers through a wall as though it were thick velvet. Later, the corridor shrinks and becomes private. A Khrushchevka, square meters stacked as if someone had ironed them. The walls are thin enough that your neighbor's sneeze requires a sincere bless you, but the door is yours, and it closes with a satisfying click that feels like moving into adulthood. A folding table by the window expands for birthdays and contracts for algebra homework. Every chair is a convertible stool by morning, guest seating by evening, step ladder when the bulb needs persuasion. A rug is the sound engineer of the household, muting the thump of shoes and the small but committed tap of a fork against a plate. The balcony, glazed or hopeful, turns into a seasonal archive. Jars in autumn, boots in winter, tomato seedlings practicing optimism in spring. There's not much space, yet somehow there's always room for one more stool and one more story. Privacy is practiced with the elegance of a stage change. Someone opens a newspaper like a curtain, and the room dims obligingly. The address itself is a kind of badge sewn inside your jacket. It rests in your passport like a leaf pressed by a patient botanist, crisp, official, and faintly green. Movement is a line of ink as much as a bus ride. The Propiska stamp, an internal biography written in violet, decides where you may live. And as odd as it sounds, it also decides what groceries you are likely to buy. Waiting lists are measured not in weeks, but in school years, and the number of times you've borrowed a neighbor estrill. A job assignment can conjure a room the way a magician conjures a coin behind the ear, but only if the bureaucracy agrees that you have ears. A marriage merges square meters politely, then negotiates shelf space like a border treaty. Addresses are currency. A good one can get you a shorter walk to bread, a closer kindergarten, a tram that arrives just often enough to feel faithful. You carry this information on paper and in your posture. You greet the concierge like a minor deity of stairwells, because she remembers whether the water will be shut off on Thursday, and which step is the ambitious one that tries to trip people near the landing. Morning belongs to whistles and clocks. A factory siren makes the air square and steady. A wall clock ticks with the sober authority of a municipal clerk. Standards called Gauss rule the screws, the jars, the way a cup should feel in the hand. A bolt fits its nut with the comforting inevitability of a proverb. Work is a chorus with assigned harmonies. Some sing steel, some sing chemistry, some sing the logic of tram schedules, and the mystical angle at which bread must be sliced to maximize butter coverage. Skill is a quiet crown. A good turner produces a finish so smooth it reflects the week back to you. A chemist keeps factory air unexciting, which is exactly the right kind of heroism. A tram driver learns to brake without waking infants. This is considered advanced citizenship. On Subotnik Saturdays, brooms convene like a parliament in session. People sweep yards, paint fences, and repair benches. The city looks slightly taller after. Pay arrives as rubles arranged like a deck of practical cards, and also sometimes as boots, sausage, or a voucher to rest by a pine forest. You can trade a favor for an appointment, and an appointment for 2 hours of comparative calm, which is a fair exchange rate. Shopping is a social science conducted on sidewalks. State stores open and the day forms a queue the way tea forms steam. The first person asks, "What are we queuing for?" in a tone that implies acquaintance with destiny. Rumor proposes oranges. Rumor recants and suggests toothpaste. The avoska, the stretchy string bag that believes in miracles, waits in your pocket like a figure of speech. Coupons called talony are birds that appear, fly in circles, and leave feathers on everyone's patience. People carry empty jars like promises to their future selves. Sugar has weight. Buckwheat has moral authority. Tangerines have diplomacy. A place in line is an organism. It can be held by a scarf or a small child who has been taught 2 lines of dialogue. My mother is behind me, and she'll be right back. Etiquette forbids boasting about the last cabbage on the shelf and recommends sighing in a way that invites camaraderie. The clerk's rubber stamp thumps with the implacable grace of a metronome. Metal scoops scrape the bottom of a bin and produce one last cup of rice as if a conjurer lived there. When you finally reach the counter, the transaction is quick, honest, and faintly theatrical, like minimalist opera. How much? So much. Receipt. The paper is clipped, you fold it. Your pocket becomes officially purposeful. Evening returns to the kitchen, the unofficial parliament of the Republic of Home. 4 burners and a pressure cooker can feed an urban constellation of cousins with the coordination of a small orchestra. Tea glasses sit in metal pots tsukiniki that make the beverage look like it has a career in engineering. On the sill stand pickles, pickled tomatoes, mushrooms that learned Latin names in a forest, and jam jars whose lids make a small pop like polite applause. Salad Olivier waits in a bowl that could double as a baby's bath. Diced potato, carrot, peas, and bologna make a pattern that reassures the eye with its grid. Toasts follow the ancient route: health, parents, the country, trains that arrive on time, long friendships, short winters, arguments wear slippers here. Politics is discussed in the tone one uses for tricky recipes, with frequent pauses for dill. Flat-soft favors that oil the hinges of daily life enters the room as a shrug with a phone number attached. A friend knows a friend who can fix a tooth on Tuesday for 2 bars of chocolate and a story that will be retold for years. After the news, variety shows rehearse themselves. A holiday film returns with the regularity of a comet and is quoted ritualistically while someone chops beets. Children learn entire scenes by heart and deploy them as answers to unrelated questions. Yet the city also breathes a second literature, the quiet one that passes hand to hand. Samizdat pages are onion skin thin, folded carefully. Their typing like footprints in snow. They travel in coat pockets and are read with a concentration usually reserved for embroidery. Magnetistat recorded songs accrues an affectionate hiss, as if the tape were becoming nostalgic in real time. No proclamations accompany this circulation. It is culture by tea light, steady, unspectacular, and somehow immune to drafts. Trains knit the map at night. In the carriage, a samovar exhales steam that smells faintly of distance. Tea is poured and steadied against the gentle sway with a practiced parental tilt. Conductors fold linen into excruciatingly precise rectangles that make you believe in geometry again. Sleep comes wrapped in the comforting knowledge that the timetable is a promise kept by professionals who admire straight lines. Summer opens the door to the dasha. In March, seedlings conduct a student protest on the windowsill, demanding soil. In June, they become a tomato democracy requiring stakes and encouragement. Mushroom hunts are officially walks. Unofficially, they are clinics in optimism with baskets for diplomas. The harvest season transforms kitchens into canning factories whose only byproduct is satisfaction. Labels are handwritten with the seriousness usually reserved for legal documents. Blackrant 1985. Do not open until snow. Rest is scheduled by voucher. The sanatorium offers pine air, mineral water with a curriculum in bubbles, and lectures on posture from experts who radiate admirable spinal narratives. People come back with cheeks that look like fresh apples and pockets full of pamphlets about exercises one can do while waiting for a bus. Winter returns with assignments. The banya reboots the week. Birch switches crack like jokes everyone knows. Felt hats protect ears with the self-confidence of eccentric professors. Outside, frost embroiders the windows in cursive. Radiators hiss like polite snakes and wield their mysterious mathematics on socks draped to dry, an exact science learned by watching a grandmother who can predict steam the way sailors predict wind. Holidays carry their own sleepiness. Children tie red pioneer scarves with the solemnity of ambassadors and salute flags that smell faintly of linen. Later, Comsmol badges open projects and friendships that outlast uniforms. Victory Day empties drawers of medals and fills streets with quiet pride. Old men stand an inch taller without needing to think about it. May Day parades teach feet the geography of boulevards and teach posters the art of being carried. New Year's Eve performs its private magic. A pine tree leans into a corner like a guest who intends to charm everyone. Tangerines glow on plates. Garlands of electric bulbs blink as though practicing. Morse code for stay awake a little longer. Midnight arrives with a toast and a promise to be reasonable. Dead Moros knock softly, wearing boots that track a little snow into a hallway that will remember him all year. After the feast, someone washes dishes in warm water while the balcony fills with plates that need winter's fridge. The stairwell smells of pine and happiness and the cautious burning of sparklers. There is travel of another kind, the miniature journey of errands. A library card slides from a jacket like a veteran ID. The catalog drawers pull out with a dry sigh, and each card holds a tiny biography of a book birthplace, Moscow, subject, geology, temperament, patient. A chess clock ticks in a park where pigeons attend with the punctuality of civil servants. Bread is shared, opinions are exchanged, and the queen demonstrates how diagonals can be destiny. A shoemaker taps nails into leather with a rhythm that could be broadcast on the radio as an afternoon program titled Competence. At home, a sewing machine that predates most relatives produces a new set of curtains out of last year's dress. The fabric remembers previous conversations and agrees not to be offended. Even the queue has rules warm enough to nap in. An elderly woman at the back should be moved forward by a collective, quiet understanding. A person who announces, "I am after the man in the hat," has bought temporary immortality. When a shipment arrives, a miracle of Bulgarian peppers or rumor of vacuum cleaners, the line shifts with the propriety of a well-behaved tide. The clerk's face remains serene, the rubber stamp does its square dance, and in the end, everyone shuffles out with a story and sometimes soup bones. Receipts are folded into the pockets of coats that will be worn for 3 more winters. They travel through the wash like small, wet biographies and end their lives as blank paper for telephone messages. Night lowers itself carefully over the courtyards. Radiators ping like distant typewriters, making small corrections. A cat patrols the fence and takes notes with its tail. Somewhere a tram slides into a stop and exhales in a way that assures you the morning timetable will be honored. In many rooms, tea cools to a conversational temperature and then to silence. In others, a pressure cooker releases the day with a satisfied whisper. The geranium on the sill considers whether to try another bloom. Thin walls turn neighbors into weather, but it is pleasant weather. The murmur of a bedtime story, a fork against a plate, a suitcase finally zipped. You might think that such lives are made of nothing but modest objects and obedient schedules. You would be right, and it turns out to be enough. If you're still awake, you can listen to the hallway again. It knows who came home late and who hung their coat on the nail that wobbles, and it wishes you a good night in the minor key of slippers. Tomorrow we'll find the kettle where it belongs, the queue where it usually forms, and the train arriving when it intends. There will be bread and dill and a new film to quote. The city closes its many eyes, and the stairwell light clicks off as softly as a librarian turning a page. You might not expect the sound of a wooden clapper to organize a civilization, but in a medieval monastery the day was sorted by echoes more than by opinions. A bell that had never read Aristotle kept the timetable with unblinking confidence. The hands on a sundial took their time, literally, and nobody argued. If you were still awake by the time we get to the annual inventory of beans, where a very serious man counts legumes by the handful while humming a psalm, feel free to subscribe, or simply nod once in agreement and let the nod keep going gently into sleep. We will move very quietly through corridors polished by sandals, past a door that refuses to stop being oak, into the paper-thin drama of ink drying on vellum. Nothing will happen quickly. It never did here. The day begins with a bell that is more patient than morning. A sleepy brother pulls the rope with 2 hands because time has a certain weight to it, and the tower replies with a note that knows every stone by name. Lamps exhale their last little smoke ribbon of night. Cloister arches turn into walking instructions. Step, breathe, a pace designed by centuries of careful feet. The rule whispers to everyone at once. Silence before prime, warm cloaks on cold shoulders. A sandal strap repaired yesterday performs its new duty with modest pride. The refectory benches rest like domesticated trees. A jug of water waits on a table with the posture of a saint who has chosen to be a jug. The bread is yesterday's, but has learned today's manners. It is sliced by a man who has been slicing bread since the reign of a king 2 kings ago. And if the slices are identical, it is because his wrist remembers the weight of virtue. Outside, the garden is rehearsing its lines. Frost talks to cabbage in a dialect that makes both of them tougher. Garden markers, short sticks with letters scratched in, stand at attention so that no one mistakes the onions for theologians. The birds hold committee meetings under the eaves and agree, after much debate, that crumbs are good. A novice, newly shaved and newly astonished at being a human who makes soup at dawn, carries a basket like a chalice and does not spill a single carrot. He passes the guest house door, which has the gentlest of hinges. Hospitality is always hired for the day. The bell rings again, and the script of the hours continues like a particularly confident lullaby. Matins dreams itself into lauds, and the voices find a key that the building knows well. On the way to the scriptorium, everyone glances at the water clock. Its polite drip marks the passage of time with the precision of a timid accountant. A wedge of sunlight crawls down a wall, measuring an angle nobody has ordered, and yet the schedule obeys. If a cart creaks in the far lane, it creaks at the correct moment by habit. News from outside arrives as a distant rumor of hooves. Inside, certainty is simple. When the bell says eat, you eat. When it does not, you translate St. Jerome. The scriptorium presents itself like a long thought. Windows are narrow, not to be stingy with the view, but to teach the light to behave. Desks tilt at the exact angle that allows a quill to land in the middle of the word et without falling asleep. Vellum sheets rest under warm stones the way cats rest under sunbeams. The quiz, mostly goose, occasionally swan for festive days, have been cut by a man whose thumb bears the topography of his trade. He tests each nib against his fingernail, drawing tiny ladders. A careful brother pricks guide holes along the parchment's margins with an awl, then draws lines with a piece of lead held in a wooden traveler's cloak. The page, once a socialized animal, agrees to host sentences in straight rows. Ink is the quietest alchemy. Oak galls, which are tree opinions made into marbles by angry wasps, are crushed with a pious grudge. They marry iron salts and water in a walnut shell, then meet a measure of gum arabic that is always judged by that looks right. When the mixture turns black in the air, a small miracle clocks in for work. A scribe dips, breathes, and writes words that were old yesterday and will be new to someone 100 years from today. Letters stand like people who have learned posture. Ascenders salute, descenders bow, capitals wear red hats. The rubricator arrives with a brush the width of a grass blade and an attitude of festivity. He adds initial letters that look like beasts doing yoga. A gold leaf waits on a pad, then there's a promise. Someone inhales at the wrong moment, and the leaf lifts like a startled ghost. There are ways to recover from this that involve steady hands and laughter turned down to a whisper. Marginalia grows where patience overflows. A monk draws a very accurate fish because dinner was trout. Someone else sketches a snail as large as a horse and gives the snail a lance because satire is a slow sport. A third man, who has not been startled since Epiphany, writes a comment to a future reader. Brother, if you find a mistake, pray for me. His handwriting is tidy enough that the prayer will certainly be received. In the corner, a small jar of pumice powder is ready to erase. It is confident but not proud. The page smells faintly of animal and rain. To rule a line and keep to it is considered a virtue in this room that needs no trumpets. Midday brings the cellarer into focus, the monastery's minister of everything that can be counted without falling asleep. His keys are a low-fashion necklace. He knows the exact number of cheeses within 6 wheels and the number of nails by the weight of a wooden box lifted with one hand. He keeps a ledger whose cover has survived 2 abbots and an experimental stew. The ledger is a polite parliament of columns. On the left margin, barley, oats, candles, salt. On the right, annotations like owed by Henry for shoeing the abbey mule 2 farthings or a reasonable substitute. The handwriting is workmanlike and unromantic, which is the appropriate style for candles. Tallies are arithmetic you can hold. A notch stick represents the debt, split lengthwise and given to both parties. The halves lock their teeth when reunited. It is a system that distrusts imagination and therefore works. On market days, the cellarer sets the stick beside a small set of copper weights and a scale whose pans have been polished by a century of fairness. A farmer arrives with apples that smell like minor celebrations. A shepherd arrives with wool that insists on being stroked. Deals are made with small words. When money is scarce, barter is fluent. A wedge of cheese equals a square foot of roof repair if both parties nod in the same rhythm. Brewing is the abbey's kinder kind of chemistry. The brewer has a calendar notched into his memory. Soaking, germination, killing, mashing, boiling, cooling, fermenting, waiting while pretending not to hover. He knows which barrel gets to stand near the north wall because that one never lies. He is skilled in the theology of yeast, when to encourage, when to rebuke, when to leave it alone and let it experience personal growth. The ale is measured not in cups but in usefulness. Strong for feast days, small for work days, a sturdy middle for travelers who have carried news in their boots. The cellar smells like wood meditating and like grain discovering opportunities. Somewhere a cat has taken up a cellared position as rat deterrent. It works irregular hours, as artists do. Audits are local miracles performed annually with wax tablets that have seen things. The abbot, who believes strongly in beans as a moral category, requests a count. The cellarer pours the beans into a bushel with the ceremony of a quiet rainstorm. They make a sound that could put horses to sleep. Numbers are tallied in units that no longer exist in most people's heads, and yet the result is satisfyingly precise. 4 sacks less a peck than last year on account of a new oven, and Brother Thomas is enthusiasm. The abbot nods and writes enthusiasm because euphemism oils the hinges of governance. The guest house is an inn run by kindness. Travelers arrive and shed their stories like wet cloaks. Pilgrims exchange their blisters for soup and are impressed by soup's ability to speak every language at once. A clerk takes down their names with dignified curiosity. He asks where they are going, but his tone implies he will not follow them. Beds are simple and competently horizontal. A pitcher of water stands on a table and thinks about rivers. In the morning, the porter rings a bell that is modest in shape and extravagant in reliability. He keeps a list of small miracles disguised as logistics, mended straps, pointed directions, dried socks, a loaf tucked into a bag for the bit of road that refuses to be short. Beyond the walls, the monastery's fields perform their calendar with choreography learned from the moon. The lay brothers cut hay with a tempo that would win prizes if anyone thought to hold a competition. Bees negotiate for flowers in a hum that makes the air taste golden. In the herb garden, rosemary holds a private conversation with memory. Sage remembers before it is asked. The infirmer dries leaves on racks and folds them into little paper envelopes labeled with characters that look like they were written by someone trying not to wake a child. When a cold arrives, it is greeted with steaming mugs that smell faintly of pine metaphors. Health here is mostly a routine, and the routine is friendly. The library is a room that keeps more silence than it needs. Books are chained to desks not because anyone suspects sin, but because books are adventurous and might wander off. Each volume is a province with its own laws. Some are heavy with theology. Some are light with lives of saints who performed interesting abstentions. A few are practical manuals on beekeeping, dyeing, and the art of getting ink out of wool. The librarian knows where everything is without appearing to look, the way a mother knows which cupboard holds the good honey. He updates the catalog by adding a sentence to a parchment roll. One homily of St. Bernard, bound and worn brown, agreeable. He does not specify agreeable to whom. This is left to the reader. Weather is the abbey's historian. In the margin of the annals, a diligent brother records the sky's memoir. A great snow on St. Agatha, swallows early, wind contrary to the rye. He adds a note about a comet that seemed both intelligent and preoccupied. He includes the price of salt and the unusual dryness of a well that usually does not bother anyone. He writes the death of a cow with a tenderness usually reserved for bishops because the cow had a name. These entries will become a future scholar's favorite lullaby. On Michaelmas, cheerful rain. That is simply good writing. There is technology, but it declines to be dramatic. The mill turns with the river's decisions, grinding flour with the self-confidence of stone. The water wheel knows its place in the cosmos and does not ask for applause. A novice learns to set type in a very early press that prints one page an afternoon if everyone behaves. The new machine smells like oil, ink, and consequence. It is very proud of itself. The scribe indulgently pats its wooden shoulder and returns to his quill, which has never envied anything. Meals are communal negotiations between appetite and gratitude. The reader of the week stands at a lectern and voices the life of a saint who once walked barefoot for reasons that now seem both extreme and obvious. The bread has a good crumb and a better attitude. Cheese is portioned by a monk who practices geometry on plates rather than parchment. Nobody rushes because haste would knock over the pitcher, and the pitcher is innocent. Afterward, the kitchen returns to its favorite occupation, turning leftovers into doctrine. A stew thickens, a pot settles. A spoon rests with an expression of having learned much. At Compline, the lights move like thinking. The chant smooths the day's edges and puts them in a drawer. The floor has learned where each foot will land and is prepared to make no comment. In cells that have personalities in the way small boats do, brothers write a last line in personal notebooks, counts of candles, a phrase from a psalm, the question of whether the south wall needs pointing. One man writes, "Today, Brother Matthew dropped a folio and did not curse. This is praised as progress." The cat, off duty, sits in the doorway with the unassailable composure of a retired abbot. If you are still awake, we can count our way through the larder once more. Barrels, 8 of ale, 3 of vinegar, pretending to be dignified. Sacks, rye, barley, oats. Oats lecturing the others on humility. Hanging from beams, onions reduced to punctuation. Hams making the air ambitious. On a shelf, a blue glazed jug with a chip that resembles the map of a country nobody visits. In a corner, the last of last year's apples, planning to become sauce. The cellarer writes it all down and closes the ledger with a sigh that means foreseeable. His keys jingle like very small bells as he goes to bed. Night folds over the abbey with the expertise of a baker folding dough. The tower watches the fields the way a shepherd watches sheep. Stars arrange themselves as if they have always known how. In the scriptorium, the ink dries with unshowy courage. The page waits to be turned tomorrow. The bell rope hangs like a patient vine. already practicing the next hour in its fibers. A distant fox remarks on the moon and receives no argument. Somewhere a candle gutters in a rush of tiny wings. The snuffer, shaped like a small trumpet, ends the day with a kiss of smoke. The monastery sleeps with a clear conscience in a very tidy pantry. If you find yourself drifting, let the bell count the minutes for you, 1 for the bread, 1 for the beans, 1 for the gold leaf that did not fly away, 1 for the ledger that believed in numbers more than in drama. When morning returns, it will do so at the same speed as always, which is to say, slowly enough to keep the world from spilling. You might not expect a doorbell the size of a coin to introduce an entire society, but in a long corridor in a very old building, a button hums, and life arranges itself politely around the sound. Somewhere a stairwell bulb clicks on with that brave little filament glow, and a kettle begins to consider boiling, which is the national bird of good intentions. If you're still awake in a little while when we reach the part about name, tags on pantry shelves and towels numbered with sewing thread. You can subscribe or simply nod in a way that suggests approval and also accidental sleep. We will keep our voices low and our details small. There is a whole country tucked inside the space between 2 apartments that share a sink, and it yawns without offense. Corridors first. The hallway is a geography of quiet negotiations. Doors have plates with family names that sound like chapters. Behind one, a grandmother shells peas into a bowl that used to be a wedding present. Behind another, a mechanic naps in a chair that is very certain of being a chair. The communalka has a single kitchen that is not a room so much as a rhythm. At dawn, it belongs to the nurse who leaves before the tram remembers herself. After that, the biology teacher, who believes in calm tea, and after that, a student who has perfected the art of frying potatoes without waking a baby. People learn each other's shoe sounds. A braided clothesline serves as a treaty, sagging slightly under the weight of a United Nations socks. The samovar's lid shivers like a quiet drum. On a shelf, jars are labeled in a handwriting that has seen winters. Sugar for room 3, buckwheat for room 5, salt for everyone because salt has no borders. A dented pan is considered shared, which in practice means it belongs to the person who currently needs it the most. Privacy is a craft assembled from curtains and good manners. Invisible borders run along tabletops like famous rivers. A teapot and a pan placed just so signal occupied better than any decree. When the bath schedule is posted, it is read with the seriousness of literature. The radio on the windowsill speaks softly through tissue paper tucked behind its grill to improve the tone. At night, the red eye of the stove watches over the bakelite handles and the spoon that has traveled between families the way a rumor does, believable because it is useful. Children build a city with chairs and blankets and a cardboard box that once held mandarins at New Year. Adults pretend not to notice the planning commission. Then later, thin walls arrive as if delivered by a giant book of promises. The Khrushchevka is new, which is to say it has never yet learned how to creak in the same place twice. Families win doors that close and locks that click with a humility no palace ever mastered. The rooms are small, which helps them keep track of you. A couch knows whether you like to read or nap and never judges either. The rug on the wall muffles the neighbor's modest triumphs. Out the window, balconies sprout like parentheses, holding laundry, dill, and gossip. In the evening, a folding table opens its wings and becomes a dining room through performance alone. A rubber plant stands in the corner considering graduate studies in resilience. Movement in this world is not only distance, but permission. The propiska in the internal passport is a line that decides where your footsteps can become official. It is a stamp that conducts traffic inside a life. A marriage can merge square meters as gracefully as hearts. A factory assignment can unlock a neighborhood. A diploma can unlock a tram line and 2 stops of possibility. The waiting list for an apartment is measured in birthdays. Children grow tall in the column next to their parents' names. The address you earn is also a biography, a logistics plan, and an invitation to join the queue for winter boots at the goods store where the manager. Cousin sometimes forgets to be strict. If you write the new address on an envelope in blue ink with a thin nib, the letters look proud, the way street signs do when snow outlines them like a correction. Morning feels the whistle before it hears it. The workday begins at a pace set by a wall clock that has always believed in punctuality as a form of affection. GOST standards keep company with the tools. Hammers stand shoulder to shoulder. Wrenches align with a loyalty that borders on moral. In a foundry, sparks practice choreography and have no time for politics. In a laboratory, a chemist ties a scarf carefully and teaches liquids to behave. Skill is a compliment that never needs to be loud. A steady tram driver is a folk hero with a uniform pocket that carries small candies for emergencies that turn out to be ordinary afternoons. Pay arrives in rubles, but also in kind, because life dislikes single currencies. Boots count as wages. Sausage is a bonus with flavor. A voucher is a paper bridge to soap or curtains or a train ticket that will smell faintly of glue when you fold it into your wallet. On Subotnick Saturday, the neighborhood sweeps itself into cleanliness and a mild sense of accomplishment. Paint lays its careful coat on a fence that has already decided to stand another winter. A half-day's labor makes the city wink a little brighter. No one writes an epic about a fresh coat of beige, but windows feel it. The state store opens on schedule, which is a virtue and a plot twist. A line forms first. The question comes second, what are we queuing for? The front learns before the back. Word travels by whisper and eyebrow. Something is close enough to something good. The avoska, a net bag folded into a pocket like a magician's handkerchief, opens its hungry lattice. People carry jars just in case bulk goods appear briefly like shy elk. Talon coupons dance in and out of existence, stamped with dates that believe in themselves. When trucks arrive, products blossom, and a calm practice motion takes over. One per customer, no pushing, the clerk's pencil moving like a conductor's baton. At the register, change counts itself, coins clinking with the tiny confidence of well-made metal. Queues become social networks you can stand inside. A place is held with a scarf draped over a chair back, with a book left politely on a windowsill, with a question, "Who is after you?" asked in voices that turn strangers into a temporary family. News travels along the line with the speed of a shrug. Somebody mentions a new soap that smells like pine. Somebody else says the candles are good this year, even the wicks. Children drift to the front to watch the cashier's stamp thump and lift, like a small square heart. Outside, a dog sits with the patience of a philosopher who has seen stores open and close before and will see them again. Evenings slide into kitchens the way warm air slides under a door. 4 burners, 1 pressure cooker, and a table with oilcloth attempt to see everyone's day at once. The Soviet kitchen parliament convenes. Debates include the correct number of pickles in Olivier salad and whether the plum jam is ready or only hopeful. Lullabies share time with discussion of coal deliveries. A cake cools near a window where condensation performs a play called Weather. Tea glasses click in their metal podstacanic holders like tiny bells reminding you to drink before the argument reaches the phase where everyone agrees. Blat, the economy of favors, leaks into the kettle with the steam. It is not corrupt so much as cozy. A clinic slot appears because someone saved you a spot, and you save them sugar. Spare parts for a clutch are found under the counter because you handed over a slice of birthday cake at exactly the right moment in history. The currency is courtesy. The interest rate is memory. On the windowsill, jars of pickles line up in their green uniforms. They stare out at the courtyard with the seriousness of soldiers and the brine of comedians. When the gas flame sputters, a spoon taps the valve like a nurse checking your pulse. Television arrives with the elegance of 2 channels and a commitment to being watched fully. The holiday phone plays again, the nation recites the lines together, and the room smiles in one piece. Variety shows bring entertainers who look like uncles leaning into a song. On New Year's, the tree becomes a studio audience for choreographed optimism. After the news, which has been arranged so that it will not cause indigestion, the screen signs off to music that winks at the national soul. People sit a moment in the blue quiet that remains, as if the apartment itself is exhaling. Magnetistic cassettes travel hand to hand, copied at low volume while the kettle sighs on the back ring. Someone's cousin has a recording of a concert with applause that sounds like rain inside a metal bucket. The tape case bears handwriting so small, it looks like a secret's bones. Semicet pages, onion skin thin, smell faintly of carbon paper and bravery. They fold neatly into a jacket pocket, a book disguised as posture. Readers practice the art of the between line, a way of hearing what is present but is also hiding under a quilt. A poem passes across a table. Everyone reads. Nobody raises their voice. The silence carries it further than shouting would. Neighbors tap on pipes to borrow time. Boil an egg for me when your water goes means the same as we are in this together. Man on the first floor knows how to repair a radio with a pencil eraser and the correct look in his eye. A woman on the third has a recipe for apple cake that requires no apples, only faith and jam. The elevator sticks between floors and then resumes by sheer embarrassment. Somewhere, a shoelace breaks at the moment when a bus pulls up. A stranger ties the shoe with a knot that holds enough until lunch. The city is a machine of small favors. Night trains argue gently with the tracks. A carriage window fogs, and someone writes a heart with their knuckle, and then laughs at themselves because they meant to write a schedule. Tea is poured at the samovar placed at the end of the corridor, and everyone sways together with the rails, as if the whole country is practicing waltz steps invented by iron. Paper tickets contain your name and the possibility of hard or soft birth. A conductor who has conquered sleep stamps them with the certainty of a glacier. Luggage rides above your head, looking down like resigned sheep. Summer means the dasha, an acre measured by ankle, not by map. Seedlings stretch on windowsills before their graduation to earth. Jars of jam are arranged like medals for a campaign conducted in berry season. Mushrooms arrive from pine forests with stories of mosquitoes in triumph. A folding cot becomes a throne under an apple tree. Water is carried in a pail that claims to be heavier than it looks, and everyone agrees to believe it. The fence is painted the color of optimism. When the train goes by, people lift their hands without thinking. They wave not at anyone in particular, but at the idea of going somewhere and coming back in time for soup. The sanatorium is a vacation designed by a doctor with a tidy mustache. Vouchers are placed into the world with the rustle of authority. Lungs are prescribed pine air and walks that no one argues with. Mineral water is drunk with a seriousness that would improve any beverage. Beds are made by professionals who believe in corners. Guests exchange books like currency and advice like gossip. Rest feels official and deserved, which is a nice combination. Evenings end with chess on a veranda where moths conduct themselves respectably around the lights. Winter arrives like a reliable bus. The banya opens its wooden mouth and lets out a cloud with the personality of a benevolent dragon. Birch switches encourage the circulation of optimism. Felt hats protect dignity. Steam resets the week. Conversation cycles through weather, relatives, and the quality of this year's cucumbers. Outside, snow squeaks under boots made brave by habit. Scarves calculate the geometry of warmth. The courtyard becomes a museum of footprints that curate themselves overnight. Children wear red scarves and the word pioneer with a seriousness that makes adults stand taller. The knot is tied correctly, which is to say with hope. Later, Komsomol badges meet project deadlines and train the skill of clapping in unison. Rallies produce speeches that are practiced without being memorized. Pride is held like a balloon that refuses to escape, mostly because the string is wrapped around a wrist efficiently. The parade route curves through the heart of things, and banners behave as if wind were invented for them. Victory Day brings tears that know their lines. May Day brings banners and tired feet that will go back to work tomorrow without complaining more than poetically. At New Year, the Yolka takes the center of the room. Tangerines appear in a bowl like a miracle in citrus. Sparklers spit ambition into the air. Dead Moraus knocks softly at the door because he respects apartments. Gifts are small and perfectly accurate. Midnight arrives in a city that has learned to count, and everybody kisses whoever is handy. The radio plays a waltz because of course it does. Outside, fireworks begin with a crack and then remember to be beautiful. If you are still awake, we can listen to radiators cooling in a language that promises morning. The courtyard at night sounds like a long train pulling into a very warm station. A tram bell in the distance practices for dawn. In kitchens, clean spoons dry with their handles aligned like rank and file. On windowsills, seedlings tilt toward the dark because they believe in it. On shelves, jars reflect the streetlight with soft geometry. Somewhere, a passport sleeps with its propiska stamped politely, the ink having taken a vow to stay put. A net bag rests in a coat pocket, empty and optimistic, which is how containers like to spend the night. The city drifts toward tomorrow without hurry. Doors click quietly, hallways exhale. Stairwells smell faintly of boiled potatoes, laundry soap, and courage in small doses. The kettle, finished with its evening opinions, dreams of boiling again. In a dozen buildings that look alike from the street and entirely different from the inside, people are almost, but not quite, asleep. There's a list on a table that says eggs, matches, thread, and visit Aunt Zena. There's a chessboard where a pawn is tilted forward like a person about to suggest something sensible. There is a plant that will survive because survival is a quite ordinary hobby here. The rails outside hum in their sleep. The country turns a page they have written together quietly in pencil with no hurry to be dramatic. If your eyes close now, the line will keep moving. Your place in the queue will be held. Someone will wake you gently when the good oranges arrive. You might not think a stairwell bulb the size of a marble could set the tempo for a whole civilization, but watch how it flickers on and the day stands at attention. A kettle begins to mutter in a kitchen you haven't seen yet, and the rails on a far avenue count wheels in their sleep. Somewhere a radio worms its tubes like a cat settling on a radiator. If you're still awake by the time the towel hooks introduce themselves numbered, labeled, and doing their best, feel free to subscribe, or just blink slowly in a way that implies approval. We'll keep the pace at the speed of steam leaving a cup. No drama here, only the reliable geography of everyday life arranged with the care of teaspoons in a drawer, dot doors, open not onto private, kingdoms but into biographies lined up side by side. A communal corridor smells faintly of soap and dill, which is reasonably democratic as perfumes go. On a shelf in the shared kitchen, jars sit with tape labels on a dozen handwritings, each label as confident as a passport and slightly stickier. A dented pot counts as collective property, which means it belongs to whoever is standing nearest to it with the most persuasive expression. The bath schedule is pinned under a magnet shaped like a horse that never gallops. Tonight the 910 belongs to the history teacher from room 4, provided the stove doesn't decide to have feelings. Invisible borders mark the table more effectively than any fence. A teapot placed at an angle is the equivalent of a velvet rope. A pan set on a chair is a polite force field. Children stage political negotiations with bread heels. Gossip travels at the speed of potato water evaporating. Privacy is not so much a place as an art form. People perfect the technique of reading while 3 other people are speaking about pickles at once. The thin wall between rooms is a piece of music written for two clarinets who agree never to play simultaneously. A rug hangs on that wall like a quiet, heroic deed, softening the neighbor's greatest hits. At night, the hallway light's porcelain switch makes a sound that could be a cricket learning to be punctual. Name tags on the towel rail are sewn in crimson thread, which is not ideological, merely visible. In a cupboard, the communal sugar disappears at a rate that suggests tea is a political party with broad support. Then the new promise of thin-walled apartments arrives. Practical and proud, like graph paper turned into architecture. The rooms are small enough that the couch and the bed are on speaking terms. The first real door that closes with a click belongs to each family, and the lock becomes a new household member with a talent for good timing. Balconies sprout like small observatories. On them, radios sing to geraniums, and laundry flags declare the Republic of Tuesday. A folding table by the window expands into a dining room by sheer resolve. A rubber plant practices endurance. The elevator, when it works, adopts the manner of a diplomat who has agreed to one more meeting than advisable. Outside, the playground is equipped with a metal slide that understands both courage and winter. Addresses, in this world, are earned the way trust is, with stamps and the passage of seasons. In the internal passport, the propiska is a line of ink that turns footsteps into authorized biography. It decides where you can live, which school your suitcase will roll past, which bus routes will memorize your face. A marriage folds 2 squares of floor plan into one domestic origami. A factory assignment can unlock a neighborhood with a view of tram lines. A diploma can negotiate with an uncle who knows a woman who knows a list. Waiting for housing feels like waiting for weather. You consult calendars, then shrug. Children grow taller between the entries on the application form. Moving day is triumphant, carried out in a borrowed truck that smells like philosophy, and rope-top morning begins when the whistle remembers itself. A wall clock with Soviet virtues, square face. Stern tick sets the tempo for lunches wrapped in wax paper. Standards, Gost, and good sense keep the bolts truthful. Wrenches align on the shadow board like soldiers who appreciate geometry. In a lab, a chemist ties her scarf and talks to glassware while the Bunsen sighs a blue yes. In a depot, a tram driver checks the sand supply and speaks kindly to the brakes. The city trusts people who trust machines. Nobody needs long speeches to appreciate the competence of a good turner. The praise is built into the thread of a screw that fits like a handshake. Pay arrives in rubles that smell faintly of pocket, and sometimes in things, boots, sausage. A voucher because the economy is multilingual and likes to repeat itself for emphasis. On Subotnik Saturdays, the city puts on work clothes and compliments itself. People clean courtyards, paint fences, prune bushes, and discover that neighbor is a verb. Half a day yields a public bench that glows with fresh lacquer and the mood of cooperative virtue. Children wield tiny brooms with the authority of passing comets. The neighborhood shuts its eyes and hears the hymn of scrubbing. No one writes a sonnet for new brushstrokes of beige, but the sunlight does that job indirectly. The state store opens on time with a dignity that belongs to trains. A line forms first, then the question, what are we hoping to acquire today? Information trickles from the counter like honey through a sieve. It might be rope. It might be tangerines. It might be candles, the kind with wicks that behave, which would be a notable event. The avoske or net bag folded so small it could pass for a philosophical position unfurls like a minor miracle. People carry jars for bulk goods because faith without containers is a risky proposition. Coupons, talony, appear and vanish like gulls at a pier. Their perforations are the hierarchy of desire in dotted lines. When the truck backs up to the loading dock, heads tilt toward the sound as if to a familiar melody. Inside, the cashier's stamp thumps paper with bureaucratic grace. Thump, lift, thump, lift. Each thump says hello to supply and demand and asks them to play nicely. Cues are social networks one can enter without an invitation. Your place is secured with a scarf draped over a chair or the soft incantation, "Who is last?" which performs the magic of fairness. Information travels along the column with the elasticity of rumor. The store in the corner had butter. Which corner? The one that used to be a bakery. It still smells persuasive if you breathe politely. A small dog sits politely by the door and refuses oranges on principle. Children learn to count through the arithmetic of waiting. We are number 6. We were 8. Progress is real. A woman near the window passes back a paper cone of sunflower seeds, and the cue becomes lightly salted and relational. When your turn arrives, you perform your role with tenderness. 1 soap, 2 candles, a small victory. Evening belongs to the kitchen and the way dusk belongs to birds. 4 burners are a parliament. The pressure cooker is the opposition, hissing productively. Oilcloth reflects the lamp like a pond that has seen things. Salade Olivier, that patient salad of peas and decision, waits in a bowl with the air of an honored guest. Pickle jars stand on the sill like medals pinned to a veteran. A cake cools near the drafty window, the crust listening to the weather report transmitted by sugar. Tea glasses sit in their metal pot-stacanic holders, quietly proud of handles that refuse to burn fingers. Each clink is a legislative vote in favor of another pour. Here, favors move through the air as naturally as steam. Blood is not a scandal tonight. It's a cousin saving a spot at the clinic, a neighbor quietly producing machine parts, a colleague arranging for a liter of paint that turned out to know you personally. The currency is courtesy, the bank is memory, the transaction fee is gratitude. You repay a favor with jam or information, or the kind of phone call made from a hallway where everyone pretends not to hear you, because pretending is one of the higher social arts. The sugar bowl is diplomatic territory. Television reduces the solemn size of the world to 2 reliable channels and a holiday. Film everyone can quote while carrying plates. News speaks in a voice designed for digestion. Variety shows introduce singers who resemble trustworthy uncles. On winter evenings, the family gathers the way iron filings gather around a magnet. When the nightly sign-off comes an anthem, a flag, a tone, the room goes blue and then philosophical. People sit for an extra minute as if the set were a fireplace that still remembers flame. The next day's weather decides itself in the quiet. Meanwhile, in pockets and desk drawers, cassettes of Magnetist It whisper their low-volume convictions. Someone's cousin recorded a concert from beyond the official calendar. The applause is shy and precise, like rain inside a tin roof. The cassette case has been repaired with tape that tells a story about tape. Thin semester pages folds into a jacket pocket. The type is slightly crooked. The carbon smell is practically a footnote. In these pages, a poem argues gently with the rule, and the reader learns how to understand the text and its shadow simultaneously. The between line is a skill like embroidery, neat and visible from a distance. Strangely durable. Travel, in this country, is an argument between wheels and plans that always ends in T. Night trains hum through the dark with the unhurried optimism of heavy things. The corridor smells of suitcase fabric and sugar. A conductor patrols with a stamp that believes in sovereignty. Tickets are card-sized biographies with choices, hard berth or soft, top bunk or bottom, corridor facing or window where the landscape streams by like a long sentence without commas. A samovar at the end of the car produces endless cups of patience. Passengers sway in synchrony with the rails, learning the choreography of arriving slightly later than intended and precisely when necessary. You tuck a biscuit into your pocket for philosophical emergencies. Summer keeps a country house in its jacket pocket. The dasha is a unit of land the size of a belief, big enough for onions and the optimism they require. Seedlings begin life on urban windowsills, graduate to garden beds with speeches, and then turn into jars labeled for winter, tomatoes that remember thunder, cucumbers with military bearing, jam that tastes like July pronounced in December. Mushrooms come home from the pines in baskets that also carry stories about mosquitoes of mythic dimension. A folding cot under an apple tree becomes a throne from which to survey your personal kingdom of beans. Neighbors trade seeds and gossip over fences that mean friendship rather than fortification. When the evening train sighs past, everyone waves because waving is a reflex and trains are old friends. For rest that is official and therefore more restful, there is the sanatorium. Vouchers rustle like well-behaved leaves. Pine forests prescribe the correct amount of lungfulness. Mineral water is served with the gravity of medicine and the flavor of geology. Beds are made with corners that would win awards if awards were given for moral perfection in linen. Chess pieces clack on wooden boards under awnings where moths file their flight plans. People take walks scheduled by a physician who believes in punctuality as a vitamin. The soul, impressed by the paperwork, agrees to be soothed that winter when it returns, brings the banya with it like a secret door. Steam negotiations are conducted in a language of whisking. Birch switches encourage circulation and philosophy. Felt hats make you look like a character from a wise cartoon. The cold outside waits politely. You will meet it again with cheeks that have rediscovered their vocation. Afterward, tea tastes exaggeratedly correct, and the streetlight finds the snow with an accuracy that could be a profession. Childhood is measured in scarves and songs. Pioneers tie red at their throats with a solemnity that encourages adults to improve posture. There are badges that click softly against clean shirt fabric. Later, the Komsomol hosts projects where deadlines and jokes become fluent in each other. Rallies are bright. Loudspeakers achieve their destiny. Banners feel the wind as a partner. You raise a sign, but carefully because glue is not to be mocked. Pride in these moments is a public utility shared, humming, not too loud. Always available dot commemorations hold a key that opens different doors in the same corridor. Victory Day brings heavy metals and light tears, photographs with corners worn smooth by gratitude. May Day brings feet that have marched enough to know where the street curves, and hands that hold flowers without tiring. In December that leans toward January, the New Year tree takes center stage. It is called a tree, but it is also a calendar disguised as a party. Tangerines arrive with their own aroma of childhood. Sparklers write shimmering arithmetic in the air. Dead Moros knocks softly like a considerate relative who never forgets to remove his snow. Gifts are modest, precise, and wrapped in paper that carries forward the mission of usefulness after the fact as book covers dot at night. Courtyards cool into a quiet warmer than you'd expect. Radiators tick as if counting something friendly. The last tram glides past, a modest comet, and the rails keep their promise to sing. In stairwells, bulbs buzz industriously. Someone's footsteps take their time up the steps with a loaf of bread that still believes in crusts. On windowsills, jars reflect the streetlight with painterly self-respect. A passport sleeps beside its propiska, ink declaring itself permanent in that careful way ink has. The avoska rests in a coat pocket like a coiled idea. If your eyelids decide to lower their curtains now, your place in the queue will be held by a scarf. Your tea will wait under its saucer lid. The city will keep breathing like a large, comfortable animal. Tomorrow will arrive gently, the bulb will flicker bravely again, and the kettle will resume its thesis on boiling, which has never failed to be persuasive. You might not expect a single light bulb in a stairwell to set the rhythm for an entire neighborhood, but hear it click on and you can just about feel the building inhale. The echo settles down the concrete like a polite waterfall, and from somewhere behind a door, a kettle begins a tiny rehearsal fin. Hopeful steam, the kind that makes windows remember fingerprints. If you're somehow still awake by the time the kettle reaches its thesis statement, you're welcome to subscribe or blink once in a very approving way. Either counts as enthusiastic support in this time zone. For now, we will move at the relaxed state of tea that refuses to boil until it has discussed the matter. The corridor of a communal apartment is its own little republic, narrow and persuasive. On the shelf above the shared stove, jars sit with labels written as many handwritings as there are soups, the tape curled at the edges like mustaches considering retirement. The calendar on the wall knows whose turn it is to mop, and the mop knows all the best hallway rumors. Doors open onto rooms that are bedrooms in the evening and policy think tanks by day. A folding bed as a domestic diplomat, shaking hands with the table and negotiating a border with the cot. Privacy is practiced rather than guaranteed. You learn to read a newspaper while 3 conversations about cabbage happen simultaneously, each one insisting it is the most interesting cabbage. A pan placed on a chair means this corner is temporarily sovereign. A teapot angled just so is a velvet rope in stainless steel. On winter nights, the light switch clicks with clerical importance, and slippers shuffle toward the bathroom according to a schedule everyone swears they follow and no one actually needs to check. Down the corridor, the towel rack doubles as a census, every loop tagged with a name and thread. There is an etiquette for everything, the correct way to lean a broom so it doesn't look urgent, the optimal number of teaspoons in the sugar bowl before anyone has to say anything diplomatic. Children exchange stamps next to the bucket of coal, their trades mediated by a stern cat who believes in fairness. A grandmother beats a carpet on the balcony with the same controlled intensity used to discuss literature. The radio on the windowsill has 2 volume settings, neighborly and festival, and most days it chooses neighborly. If a new saucepan shows up, the building tours it the way museums tour foreign masterpieces, everyone agreeing to be impressed without diminishing the old kettle's feelings. And then, as if the city had put on a pair of new shoes, the small flats arrive, 1 real door per family, walls thin enough to oblige perfect manners, a balcony that can host 2 chairs, a tomato plant, and ambition. The first key in a pocket becomes a personality trait. In these rooms, furniture fits like Tetris and gets the high score. A couch folds into a bed with a decisive sigh. A bookcase becomes a wall. A rug absorbs a surprising amount of tension between upstairs and downstairs. Out on the landing, the elevator behaves like an old friend present, slightly moody, not offended when you take the stairs. On the balcony, a rubber plant practices sociology while a string of laundry flaps political opinions at the wind. Even the windows learn new tricks, opening in a spirit of international cooperation, both horizontal and vertical. The kettle, now promoted to department head, whistles more confidently. To live anywhere officially requires ink, and the propiska in the internal passport is the line where geography becomes biography. The stamp is not merely a stamp. It is logistics, school districts, bus routes that will memorize your face. A marriage can merge square meters with the audacity of algebra. A factory assignment can unlock a neighborhood with a view of tram lines and a kiosk that sells the good apples. A university placement negotiates with a waiting list like a small, polite thunderstorm. People talk about moving in the future tense, a season away, after the baby, after the awarding of the diploma, after the cousin's cousin retires and a room breathes out. Children grow between one official stamp and the next, measured in birthdays and sharpened pencils. When at last the paper says yes, a cousin arrives with a truck that smells like rope and potato sacks, and every chair becomes a folk hero of heavy lifting. After midnight, with the bed assembled and the lamp discovering its job, Someone writes the new address on an envelope, just for the pleasure of seeing it. The workday begins with a whistle that could be mistaken for weather. A wall clock with a reliable tick looks down on benches arranged like paragraphs. GOST standards keep the bolts square about their responsibilities. Calipers snap shut with the satisfied click of problems solved in millimeters. A lathe hums a bass line both soothing and stern. In the lab, a chemist ties back her hair with string that has read the manual. Glassware answers in clear vowels. Out on the street, a tram driver tests the brakes, checks the sand, and then takes the city in tow like a shepherd for people on errands. No one gives long speeches about pride. The screws that fit, the batches that pass inspection, the tram that slides into the stop with a dignity that teaches children about geometry, these are the speeches. Wages arrive with the smell of pockets and possibility, occasioned by envelopes. Sometimes the pay includes things: a pair of boots, a voucher, a kilo of confidence in sausage form. The economy is bilingual and repeats itself kindly. On Sabatnik Saturdays, the whole city puts on its work scarf. Fences receive paint with the slightly ceremonial air of being noticed in public. Courtyard trees are pruned by citizens who learn the skill from other citizens while pretending they always knew it. Sidewalks lose their winter's worth of essays about mud. People sweep the stairwells with a thoroughness that suggests the dust might try to return and needs a talking to. Half the day belongs to rakes and cheerful criticism. The other half belongs to tea and a cake that tastes like good intentions. Children wield broom size to their optimism and discover that public benches are better when everyone agrees about them. The city glows as if every brick remembered its job description. Shopping, when the doors open on schedule, is communal theater with an excellent chorus. A line forms first, the question second. What are we anticipating? Butter bulbs? A rumor moves along the queue that there were oranges yesterday on the corner that used to be a bakery and still smells like arguments about bread. Everyone carries an Avaska, the miraculous net bag folded to the size of hope. It can swallow potatoes, a suspicious quantity of onions, and a loaf that crunches like a good idea. Coupons Talony appear like visiting dignitaries with perforated coats. The cashier's stamp thumps paper in 4/4 time. Thump lift, an excellent percussion section. Someone invents a system for keeping everyone's place while going to check another counter. It is held together with scarves, a mutual understanding of fairness, and the phrase, "Who is last?" which functions as both password and lullaby. Queues have conversational climate zones. At the door, small talk. Near the counter, meteorology. By the window, literature. A woman near the radiator passes back a paper cone of sunflower seeds, and suddenly the line becomes a dinner party. 3 people recite a recipe for herring under a fur coat while pretending not to judge each. Others' interpretation of carrots. A child practices early mathematics by counting jars. A pensioner tells a joke so gently that it sounds like history with opinions. Every so often, an employee announces the arrival of a product with a stagecraft of fireworks. Sardines. They say in a tone that makes sardines feel like a good career move. Bags rustle. Receipts accumulate in pockets like autumn leaves. The exit door, when you reach it, practically shakes your hand. Evening collects everyone in the kitchen, the city's most persuasive room. 4 burners are a cabinet. The pressure cooker is a committee that hisses only when provoked. Oilcloth crinkles with the self-esteem of useful things. Salade Olivier is on good behavior in a big bowl. Peas counting themselves again and again. On the sill, jars of pickles look like trophies for heroism in vinegar. A cake cools near the draft, proud as a swimmer with a towel. Tea glasses stand in their podstacanic holders like diplomats who have seen more than they let on. The first pour is for the oldest. The second is for the person just back from a late shift. The third is for anyone who has an interesting rumor about the neighbor's new sewing machine. Words are measured but warm. The sugar cube, with the spoon balanced on top, melts in its own sweet time. In this room, favors have a way of peopling themselves. Blot isn't a scandal, but a network of kindnesses that remember addresses. A colleague knows a dentist who can see you on Thursday. A cousin has paint that wishes to meet your hallway. A friend of a friend can look at your radio and persuade it to resume broadcasting the news in a key that flatters it. The repayments are elegant and rarely monetary. A jar of plum jam labeled in careful script. An extra seat at the clinic. Help moving a wardrobe that unexpectedly turned out to weigh as much as policy. The telephone, when it rings on the wall between kitchen and corridor, belongs to everyone and no one simultaneously. And people respectfully fail to hear each other's conversations with the precision of trained musicians. Television hums in the next room. It's light, a domestic lighthouse. There are 2 channels, which is plenty if you have conversation. The evening film is so familiar that the jokes arrive early and the family laughs in harmony with the future. A new singer appears on a variety show with hair that intends to be famous. Everyone nods as if greeting a relative. At sign-off, the anthem plays, the flag glides up the screen, and the set fades to a dot that holds its breath for a dignified length of time. Afterward, the room stays blue for a minute, an afterglow in which grocery lists make excellent progress. The day steps quietly into a drawer dot. There are also quieter transmissions. Cassettes of magnetistic travel in inside pockets, their labels written over old labels, time layered like pastry. You press play at a sensible volume. The tape hisses like a helpful aunt, and a voice from somewhere not on the official calendar sings about the weather of the soul. A book copied on thin paper samizdat arrives folded deep in a coat, its carbon smell a perfume of ambition. The type is a little slanted, the margins literary in their enthusiasm. You read with a double vision of people who can see both the sentence and the sentence's shadow. At the bottom of the page, dots and commas behave as if nothing unusual is happening, which is considerate of them. Trains think at night. You board with a suitcase that has known better handles and a pillowcase full of optimism. A conductor examines the ticket with a stamp that understands borders and politely respects them. The carriage sways with the logic of long distance. The corridor collects a taxonomy of slippers. In the Samovar's neighborhood at the end of the car, tea pours like a verdict you don't mind. You learn the etiquette of compartments, the right height for the window to be open, the correct ratio of salami to bread for midnight snacks, the fact that time zones change but sugar remains exactly sugar. Stations float by with names that sound like geography reading a poem. The loudspeaker clears its throat as if it too has somewhere to be. By morning the train and you are on a first-name basis. The Dasha thrives in sentences that begin with, after the last frost. Seedlings sprout on apartment windowsills under the protection of newspapers. Shy as diplomats. Come June, the urban train empties like a pocket into distances ruled by cabbages. Fences are short, gossip generous, shovels acute. Tomatoes rise into the kind of red that makes neighbors praise the soil while implying the gardener's competence. Cucumbers, disciplined and efficient, queue themselves into jars. Mushrooms arrive in baskets and legends, both cleaned with equal seriousness. Evenings end with chairs pulled into the yard and the sight of the Milky Way discovering how to be useful. On Sunday nights, returning trains smell faintly of dill, creosote, and contentment. For rest that is typed in triplicate, there is the sanatorium. A voucher flutters like a well-behaved bird. Pines stand in vertical agreement. Mineral water is served in tulip-shaped glasses with the gravitas of Parliament. You drink to other people's health and your own sense of compliance. Medical staff schedule naps as if they were board meetings. Bed sheets achieve a crispness that suggests a committee. Chess clocks under a gazebo where moths file motions. The day is a sentence without verbs, strolls, air, soup, light. By the end of the week, even your thoughts have tightened their belts and stood up straighter. Winter returns like a colleague who is strict but fair. The banya steams. Birch switches attend to circulation and to opinions. Felt hats make everyone look like a cartoon about wisdom. The cold outside waits with patience and excellent posture. After the plunge, cheeks glow with a scientifically verifiable belief in life. On the way home, snow speaks fluent squeak, and the scarf smells like smoke and eucalyptus. At the entrance, the stairwell bulb greets you like a concierge who knows your reading list taught children learn citizenship in the key of cheerful. Pioneers tie red scarves around their necks with knots advised by posters. The fabric brightens even a cloudy day. There are badges for doing things correctly and for doing them with vigor. They clink softly, a kind of portable applause. Later, the Komsomol organizes rehearsals for the future projects with deadlines, speeches that prefer brevity, friendships that outlast exams. The loudspeaker at a rally is not subtle, but it does have excellent diction, and banners practice their wave. The city loves a parade the way a cat loves a windowsill, with honest affection and a little suspicion about pigeons. Holidays arrive like trains that keep their promises. Victory Day carries medals with the gravity of meteorites. Photographs come out of drawers, their corners rounded by touch. Each face has a footnote. Flowers look at veterans as if remembering something. May Day carries feet that know the route by heart. Slogans march in a straight line and try not to sweat. Paper doves pretend to obey physics. December leans into January, and the New Year tree, which is scientifically different from a Christmas tree, takes the place of honor. Tangerines perfume the room with the exact smell of a school vacation. Sparklers write brief, bright essays. Dead Morose knocks softly because he is a considerate myth. Gifts are sensible and thrilling. A set of colored pencils, a book with illustrations of trains that look like good ideas. Night finds the courtyard again. Radiators tick like satisfied insects. Somewhere a tram explains itself to the rails in a tone reserved for old friends. The last loaf of the day rests on the table, still thinking crusty thoughts. A passport sleeps beside a propiska that has proven itself as dependable as a door. The avoska recovers in a coat pocket like a folded promise. Snow moves past the lamp in disciplined diagonals. If your eyelids drift downward now, the kettle will keep breathing on your behalf. The stairwell will keep watch in its gentle bureaucratic way, and the city will continue its long, comfortable sentence about nothing dramatic and everything necessary. Tomorrow, a light will click on again, ready to declare that the day has begun exactly on time. Give or take a cup of tea. You might not think a single stairwell bulb could keep time for an entire building, but listen to the click and you can hear the day turn over like a page in a careful notebook. The glass hums, warm as a pocketed coin, and the light pulls down the steps until even the dust motes look punctual. Somewhere a kettle tests its whistle, clearly practicing for the big moment later. If you're still awake in a few minutes, you can subscribe, or you can simply rotate your pillow to the cooler side and consider that your signature. Either way, the paperwork is in excellent order. For now, let's drift at the speed of steam. Unhurried, precise, as if the city were a samovar and we were reading it cup by cup dot in a corridor where the paint is the color of patience. Doors open onto rooms that share more than air. A communal kitchen spreads like a map of appetites, one stove with burners assigned by folklore, a shelf where jars wear handwritten labels, and the scotch tape has small wrinkles like laugh lines. The sink knows everyone by their plates. On the wall, a schedule in pencil decides whose turn it is to scrub the corridors, and the corridor pretends to be surprised each time. People move through this narrow parliament with a soft choreography of long familiarity. You don't need to see the neighbors to know them. You can identify them by the scent of frying onions or the way their slippers approach. A braided clothesline in the room stands in for borders more persuasive than any lock. The table folds against the window like a book closing for the night, and opens in the morning with equal literacy. A teapot placed on a chair means reserved. A saucepan on the sill declares negotiations ongoing, and a rag on the hook means we are still deciding who is last. Privacy. That timid bird perches where it can. People memorize the sound of each other's coughs and pretend not to. A radio whispers through a thin wall, and the neighbor taps once on the radiator, perfectly content, perfectly included. In winter, the hallway smells like wet wool and newsprint. In summer, cabbage becomes a unit of measurement. Children trade stamps under the coat rack, performing solemn diplomacy over triangular envelopes. A cat patrols the landing with the self-importance of a local official and the soft paws of a conspiracy. Even the broom has opinions and leans against the door at an angle that suggests it is thinking deeply about crumbs. When someone acquires a new saucepan from a cousin's cousin, the entire floor holds a brief viewing, admiring the shine and pretending not to compare it with the veteran pot that has gone to peel beets for the party. Then the building learns a new trick: individual flats, small and square and confident in their geometry. A wall that belongs to you behaves like a new acquaintance, then friendly, a good listener. The first real door closes with the soft authority of privacy and citizenship combined. A balcony inherits a tomato plant and an opinionated geranium. Both face the street like pensioners bench watching. The couch unfolds into a bed and back again with the dignity of a well-practiced bow. Storage is a sport. Suitcases become cabinets because they know how to keep secrets. A rug muffles the neighbor's meticulous tap dancing at 7 in the morning, and the ceiling lamp wears a shade that turns the room into tea color. People talk about square meters the way collectors talk about stamps, with respect and a flicker of triumph. They know the square meter that holds the best sunlight at 6 p.m., and the square meter where the bread cools fastest, and the square meter that makes a good stage for a child's New Year poem. To live somewhere is to be written there. The little internal passport opens like a practical prayer book, and the propiska sits inside it like a lion with surprising power. The stamp is geography with manners, deciding which school will learn your handwriting, which clinic will pursue your temperature, which library will recognize your face and not ask for proof of address because it has already memorized your address. Young couples consider the calculus of space. Will a wedding ring add 2 square meters by diplomacy? Will a factory assignment unlock a room near a tram and a bakery with honest bread? A cousin arranges a note. A friend of a friend knows a superintendent. The building itself seems to nod in approval. Waiting lists move at the speed of seasons. Children grow a centimeter between one promise and the next. When the stamp finally lands, it thumps like a restrained drumbeat, and suddenly the city is less theoretical. You carry the apartment key as if it were a small metallic animal that must be kept warm in your palm. The whistle that starts the morning is confident but not vain. It has done this before. In a workshop, a row of lathes spins like patient bees. GOST standards sit on the shelf with the charisma of rules that actually work. Calipers close and open like thoughtful eyelids. A bench smells of oil and slow victories. In the lab, a chemist ties back her hair with a ribbon that knows algebra, and glassware replies in clear syllables: pipette, burette, beaker, all the words that look like they stand straighter when capitalized. A tram driver checks the brake sand, nods to the conductor, and sets off with the confidence of a mother goose leading a very organized flock. The ticket punch clicks holes in neat constellations, as if the night sky had been divided into fares. Wages are envelopes that wrestle with both rubles and rumors. Sometimes the envelope brings vouchers to me to match money, shoes to match promises, a seat at a sanatorium to match a doctor's advice. People count what they have and what they have coming and manage to pay respect to both columns. When the day ends, the factory siren drops the period at the end of a long sentence. The neighborhood breathes out. On Subotnik Saturdays, the city puts on its work gloves and clears its throat. Adults with rakes become the kind of adults children remember in positive adjectives. Paint approaches fences and improves them. Litter is politely shown the door. Window frames get a coat of white that makes even cloudy days look well lit. You wash the stairwell with your neighbors and discover the generous science of cooperation. One person fetches water, one deploys the rag, one supervises gravity. At the end, tea tastes like a conclusion everyone can agree with. Shopping is not a task, but a narrative structure. The line assembles first like a chorus, and then the question follows. What are we here for today? Better, possibly. A rumor reports oranges at the corner where the bakery used to be. The Aveska, the little med of hope, sleeps folded in a pocket and expands to swallow potatoes, onions, a loaf with a temper. Coupons arrive with perforations, so exact they feel persuasive. A clerk stamps the inventory with a tempo that encourages small talk. Queues become polite neighborhoods. A scarf holds someone's place while they fetch sour cream. The phrase "who is last" serves as both entry badge and incantation to order. News moves down the line more accurately than weather forecasts. Someone recommends mixing mustard into mashed potatoes, and 5 dinners are instantly improved. A child counts jars and is gently corrected into arithmetic dot at the counter. Sardines appear in a neat glinting wall, each tin with a face that says, in essence, we are reliable. The cheese arrives with a rhyme that knows responsibility. Sugar is measured into paper cones that manage to hold both sweetness and paper dust, a combination that tastes like childhood. The cashier wraps a cake in string that could double as a measuring device for patience. Outside, the bag grows heavy in the good way, and the walk home smells like rye bread practicing for greatness. You unpack and the kitchen accepts your purchases with a nod, reorganizing its tiny universe to welcome flour, soap, the rare lemon that walks in like a minor celebrity. By evening, the kitchen is a parliament with a quorum. 4 burners host negotiations, 1 serious, 1 experimental, 2 suspenseful only to the cook. The pressure cooker breathes like a thoughtful animal. Oilcloth shines with the contentment of useful things. Salade Olivier sits in a large bowl counting its peas. Pickles on the sill regard the room through green glass. They disapprove of speed, but approve of everything else. A cake cools near the draft, exuding democratic optimism. Tea glasses click into their metal pot-stickanic holders with a sound that says, now the real conversation can begin. There is a sober initiative to discuss physics homework, an opposition coalition recommending more dill, a special committee on whether one should add apple to vinaigrette. The kettle whistles not as an alarm, but as a vote called to order. Sugar cubes go down in a clink like civilized compromises. Favors move through the air like careful birds. Someone needs a pediatrician who will see them before Wednesday. Someone else offers a cousin who works in the clinic. A colleague knows where to find good bolts. A neighbor can procure a book from a library with excellent handwriting. This is not scandal but currency in the civilized sense, traded without receipts but with gratitude. You repay with jam that tastes like late summer, with help moving a wardrobe shaped like an idea, with a quiet word to a distant friend. Telephones hang on corridor walls and ring with the gravity of announcements. People politely fail to overhear, which is a skill learned over time. The television hums in the next room, the screen a small square moon. There are 2 channels generous if you also have a teapot and opinions. Old films return like uncles who tell the same stories, and everyone laughs right on cue. A variety show opens with a fanfare that could wake wheat. Singers appear with hair disciplined by the weather. News anchors deliver the day in a tone that flatters the furniture. At sign-off, the screen closes its eye in a bright dot that refuses to hurry, then finally sleeps. The apartment glows for a moment as if the electricity were remembering stories. Meanwhile, a cassette of Magnetist changes hands beneath the table, labeled in a friend's handwriting, recorded over an earlier label that still peeks through like a palimpsest. The tape hisses with modesty, and then a voice says what it means to say, quiet but persistent. A book copied on onion skin pages arrives wrapped in paper as if it were a loaf. The type is slightly sideways. The staples are brave. You read slowly. Even the commas seem to have agreed to be careful. No one announces anything, but somehow something is announced. At the end, you slide the pages back into their coat of paper, and they leave with their next reader, lighter than air and heavier than habit. Travel turns the country into a conversation. Night trains breathe at the platform, windows lit like polite promises. You lay sheet over mattress, and it holds a shape that suggests millions of similar sheets have done this well. The carriage corridor fills with slippers and gentle negotiations about the window. At the samovar, tea arrives at the exact temperature for reflection. Station names slide by like historic footnotes, some vowels too wide, some consonants proud of their work. The conductor's stamp is a tiny hammer of authority that somehow calms the carriage more than it disciplines it. Someone slices sausage with the precision of a watchmaker. Someone else balances bread knife and novel like a small engineering feat. When the train moves, time unbuttons its collar. Summer, of course, belongs to the dacha, which is where cities go to exhale. Seedlings on the windowsill have been practicing under the newspaper. Now they are planted with quiet ceremony. The soil has opinions you will learn. Tomatoes blush at their own productivity. Cucumbers march into jars with the brisk efficiency of civil servants. A neighbor leans over the fence to discuss the science of compost, and the conversation lasts through 3 cups of tea and the arrival of a cloud shaped like a sheep. Mushrooms appear in the forest like dot points of delight, each with a biography recited by an older relative who absolutely knows which are safe. The basket returns to the kitchen like a parade. At evening, chairs move outside and stars resume their duties. Everyone sleeps the deep sleep of people who have done something measurable with a shovel. When the body asks for a scheduled rest, the sanatorium clears its throat and offers a program. Pines stand in calm formation. Mineral water is served as if it were a political resolution and you were a delegate obligated to vote yes 3 times a day. Walks are prescribed and taken seriously. Rooms smell of clean sheets and medicinal tranquility. Chessboards rattle politely under gazebos. The schedule includes naps with the precision of trains and lectures about the health of the liver that people attend cheerfully because the chairs are comfortable. By the end of a week, even sighs have improved their posture. Winter returns with the grace of routine. The banya steams you into improved certainty. Birch switches are wielded with what can only be called affection. Felt hats make every head resemble a cartoon of wisdom. The shock of cold on wet skin is pure punctuation. Outside, breath writes simple poems in the air. Snow squeaks like a toy with excellent bearings. Back home, radiators tick as if they are counting stories to be used later. Children wear red scarves that look surprisingly decisive against brown coats. Pioneers salute with sincerity and collect badges shaped like careful stars. The Komsomol arrives with projects that teach the art of deadlines. Parades practice being forward. A marching band measures the main street in audible units. May Day shakes banners awake, and even the trees clap by losing last year's twigs. On Victory Day, medals come out of boxes and people stand a fraction of an inch taller. Photographs appear from envelopes the edges, softened by years, and the city looks at them and decides to be quiet for a minute. You can almost hear the asphalt listening. New Year settles like a benevolent snow. A tree migrates indoors and receives tinsel as a natural rite. Tangerines perfume the apartment with the exact scent of vacation. Dead Morose knocks softly at the door, presumably because good fairy tale characters understand sleeping neighbors. Sparklers write difficult words in the air and then resolve into asterisks. The television offers a familiar film in which everyone knows when the jokes are important. Midnight arrives exactly on time. Glasses touch with the delicacy of porcelain that was promised to behave. In the morning, floors crunch with pine needles in satisfaction. Late at night, the courtyard is a proof that quiet exists. A tram sighs in the distance like a long sentence finishing well. The snowplow makes a sound like a zipper closing the day. Windows go dark in an order you could set your watch by if you needed a watch. Inside, the Avoska hangs from its hook, empty but confident, and the little passport sleeps with its propiska, both dreaming of addresses. The kettle, loyal and philosophical, decides not to whistle until morning. If your eyes close now, the building will keep breathing and the stairwell bulb will click off in due course. Tomorrow will arrive without drama, exactly where you last put it, next to the tea, between the radio and the bread. You might not expect a kettle to set the pace for a million mornings, but listen, the tiny lid trembles, the steam rehearses, and somewhere a tram sighs in agreement as if the city itself were a stovetop. If you're still awake in a few minutes, you can tap subscribe the way one taps a window to check the weather softly, without commitment. If you drift off instead, I'll assume you've mastered the art of efficient resting, which is very on brand for tonight's subject. We'll walk slowly through daily life in the Soviet Union, the kind that leaves long trails of shoe prints and corridor dust, and very neat pencil notes in the margins of the calendar. Nothing urgent happens here. The plot, like the kettle, chooses to simmer. Open a door, and you step into a corridor that has learned everybody's footsteps by heart. On the hooks hang coats in the great winter colors brown, another brown. An ambitious gray in every pocket holds a key, a list, or a surprisingly useful piece of string. The communal apartment understands the mathematics of proximity. Rooms meet along a shared kitchen like little nations with careful diplomacy. A name on a shelf speaks with more authority than a lock. This pot belongs to Nina Ivanovna, who makes soup that understands human nature. That pan belongs to Grisha, who salts with the boldness of youth and once attempted omelets for 12 with heroic, foamy results. Someone has claimed a corner of windowsill for pickles that stare out through green glass like strict librarians. Above the sink, a schedule written in pencil leans toward fairness. Wash days, scrub days, the day for conquering burnt-on mysteries in other people's pots. There is a little dish of steel wool that, if given a medal, would not seem undeserved. The corridor itself is a minor language. 2 taps on the radiator means tea. 3 means, do you have onion? 1 long continuous tapping, halted by laughter, means, please bring your chair. We have opinions. At night, the light bulb hums with moths that look like correction marks. The bathroom key hangs from a piece of twine thick with folklore. When the door closes, everyone politely forgets one another, an advanced social technology called selective hearing. Meanwhile, in the kitchen, the pressure cooker exhales like a philosophical cow. Spoons clink with the confidence of metronomes. On the table, oilcloth blooms with cherry patterns that have watched decades of speeches about dill. Bread lambs heel first, regimentally. A cat patrols strictly for unauthorized fish, certain of their existence even when evidence is scarce. Then, quite suddenly in historical terms, the apartment learns to be introverted. The new one-room flats are small, square, and proud of their arithmetic. A wall that is truly your own behaves differently from a wall you negotiate with. It accepts nails without debate and remembers where you put the calendar. A door that you can lock becomes a sentence that ends when you decide it does. The table folds against the window, and the window pretends to be a balcony overlooking important events, like pigeons. A sofa transforms into a bed every night, like a demonstration of industrial capability. Storage becomes a poetic genre. Suitcases are not for travel, but for secrets. The good sugar hides in a tin that used to hold mints, but has been promoted. Fabrics learn to hover. Drying racks span the room like soft scaffolding. The rug invites neighbors to walk more quietly, or at least to imagine that they do. Outside, the Khrushchevka blocks stand like patient notebooks filled with squared paper, nothing fancy. But every box ready for a number, every number ready for a planned out address is destiny as written by a clerk with a firm stamp. Your propiska, inked in the internal passport, is the bureaucracy's love letter. Stay here. Live here. Vote for your dentist here. It is also a map folded into your pocket so many times the creases have become topography. Need a school? Look to the right-hand page. Need a clinic? Show the stamp and acquire a thermometer. The stamp is small, the way a seed is small. It grows into tram routes you learn by heart, into the shop where the butcher calls you by surname, into the library that understands your taste in naval novels. People court their addresses as if they were serious partners. A job can marry you to a district. A marriage can marry you to a different queue. The waiting list for housing moves not so much in days as in birthdays. Children measure the time by the heights on the doorframe, and by how much the wallpaper pattern has migrated due to redecoration. There is a humble thrill in receiving a phone call that says a room has opened. Like weather improving unexpectedly on a holiday you had not planned to take. Morning at work begins either with a siren that sounds like proof of concept, or with a bell that believes in order. A wall clock with a socialist face ticks audibly, satisfied to be useful. The factory is a concert whose orchestra has replaced violins with drill presses. Lathes hum in pitches that would impress an organ builder. Toolboxes smell of oil and carefulness. A fitter chooses a wrench from the row as if selecting a chess piece. Measure twice, the proverb says. Often measure thrice because precision is a respectable hobby. The rules have names, goss so official they could serve as wedding witnesses. The manuals bluntly state what is straight and what is sufficiently straight, a distinction that occupies entire friendships. Somewhere a stencil types out serial numbers that march like a regiment down the neck of a machine part. On the drafting board, triangles fraternize with compasses and plot trajectories the way migratory birds plot rivers. Pay arrives in envelopes that are neat enough to represent the theory of envelopes. Inside there is money and sometimes something more, vouchers that behave as money's shy cousin. Shoes are purchased with both rubles and patience. Meat can be earned with a conversation and a coupon that tears along a dotted line, more satisfyingly than any other dotted line in history. The canteen serves borscht that averages out to comfort. Cutlets arrive in a countable number per plate, restoring faith in arithmetic. At lunch, a chemist speaks about the method for determining fat content in cheese, and someone else counters with a proposal for improving soap fragrance. Both contributions seem equally patriotic. After work, Subotnik Saturday arrives as a civic handshake. Citizens clean their own yards, as if the dirt had written them a letter asking nicely. Benches get a coat of paint, which smells like punctuality. Fences become wide enough to pass exams. Children push wheelbarrows that contain a suspiciously low density of leaves. This is still considered helpful. Shopping is theater where the audience stands. Cues begin first, facts second. One asks who is last, with the same reverence used for genealogies. The last person raises a hand without moving their feet. The Avoska net bag lives in the pocket, folded smaller than hope. In an instant, it expands to a cartography of knots, capable of holding 22 potatoes, bread with heroic crust, and a loaf of sausage with a name like a poem about squares. Rumor travels down the line. Oranges at the cooperative, sugar at the big store, the rumor about coffee. A woman returns from the back room with the authoritative walk of someone who knows whether butter exists. Coupons flutter like governmental butterflies. A clerk taps a numeric code into a bulky metal machine that prints receipts with the satisfaction of a bureaucrat finishing a proverb.d fits it, the shortage teaches. Improvisation the way winter teaches hats. If no lemons are available, a jar of marmalade will be asked to attend tea on their behalf. If shoes cannot be found this week, the cobbler will hold a seminar with your old heels and convince them to be young again. Friends carry messages cross town. They have tights at the small store by the stadium. People enlist spouses, cousins, and the next-door neighbor's dignified grandmother in cooperative shopping maneuvers comparable to small military exercises, except with better jokes. Meanwhile, jars wait obediently for sugar to become jam. The label is written at a slight angle because the writer was eating a cookie at the same time. Shelves acquire orderly stacks of paper napkins, which are to be saved for parties, which makes every party appear slightly more official than it is dot by evening. The kitchen resumes its job as the loudest quiet room in the house. The table decides who is wise that night and who is responsible for cutting bread. Tea glasses slide into their metal podstacanic holders with a sound as decisive as a gavel. The kettle whistles its classic aria. Here, Parliament gathers without paperwork. There is debate about whether you should add canned peas to the salad, and whether mustard should be domestic or the thrilling imported kind that rarely appears, but when it does, the tongue stands at salute. Someone brings a story about a professor, a bus ticket, and a dog who understood economics. Votes are taken. The majority believes dill goes everywhere. A minority insists dill is already everywhere. Everyone promises to try both methods and report back. Under the table, another republic gently prints itself. A friend passes a cassette of Magnetisted under the oilcloth, like a message in a bottle that never met the ocean. The handwriting on the label leans forward, earnest and a little excited. The tape will hiss like winter when you press play. The hissing is part of the testimony. A book typed on onion skin appears. Whole chapters faint as if whispered by onions themselves. The pages are numbered in a way that feels personal. They are passed with both hands, as one passes a newborn or a hot baking tray. If someone copies the copy, that is merely the book asking to be multiplied. In the morning, they become nothing more scandalous than reading words. Sentences, commas that refuse to hurry. Television offers 2 channels, which is also the number of neighbors you need for an opinion. The signal arrives with snow, even in July. News anchors sit at a desk that could be a cousin of every desk in every office. They say things in the comforting tone used by furniture. Variety shows deliver jokes that fit well, like last year's gloves. The New Year's film appears again like a relative who tells the same story but always adds a new good detail. When programming ends, the screens fade to a bright dot that lingers a moment longer than necessary, like a gentleman saying goodbye in the hallway and putting on a scarf slowly. Radios live on the shelf above the sink and narrate weather conditions to people who find that. Information spiritually nourishing while washing mugs.travel is a long sentence written with carriage wheels. Night trains glow like long apartment buildings that have decided to move. You enter your compartment and immediately perform the rituals of linen, sheet, blanket, the crisp geometry of standardized sleep. The corridor is a slow river of slippers and card games. At the samovar, steam makes everyone look sensible. A conductor with a hole punch visits your ticket and transforms it into compliance. Station names slide into view Voronezh, Penza, Omsk-like signatures at the bottom of history's letters. You drink tea from the heavy glass and believe for one full minute that all problems can be solved with biscuits. Outside, forests hold their breath. Inside, someone tells a story about serving in the north that lasts until the next time zone. Summer means the dasha, philosophy carried out with seeds. The soil is acquainted with your family by surname. Seedlings, raised on a windowsill under yesterday's newspaper, go into the ground wearing faces of grave responsibility. Tomatoes blush with gradual self-awareness. Cucumbers pioneer toward the fence. Yes, thank you. They have a plan. Dill flourishes as if appointed to office. You learn that watering cans are heavier in the morning when ambitions are high. Afternoon naps and web chairs count as agriculture. Neighbors lean over fences to discuss the rain as if it had personally consulted them. A debate about potato beetles opens with the solemnity of a congress and closes with an exchange of cuttings and cake. In the forest, mushrooms reveal themselves to approved relatives only. Baskets return. Your kitchen becomes a research institute, and the ceiling smells like the achievement of drying dot when the body petitions for a pause. A sanatorium issues a decree in favor. Pine trees line up in polite columns and produce air by the square kilometer. Mineral water is served in small miserly glasses, restorative by declaration. Walks are prescribed like poems. The schedule includes naps with the force of law. A nurse clucks with the gentle tyranny of someone who knows exactly how long you should sit in the sun. Even the deck chairs appear bureaucratically organized, each with a number that implies a registry. You return home scientifically improved and carrying a certificate. You will show to the kettle. Winter recommences with a clean sense of purpose. The banya steams like an argument that leads to universal agreement. Birch switches sting politely and then apologize by making you feel 10 years younger. Felt hats convert everyone into caricatures of sages. Outside, snow squeaks the way new shoes do when they plan to be excellent. Radiators in apartments hold a very specific conversation with pipes. The theme is heat, and the pipes make persuasive points. Windows frost into patterns so proud of themselves you don't scrape them off immediately. In the evening, the courtyard lights up into small yellow islands. The laundry line becomes a philosophy of scarves. Children operate on the frontier between earnestness and pageantry. They wear red pioneer scarves tied with knots that look as official as anything on state paper. They salute mainly to make grandparents proud, and because the salute fits the hand like a useful habit. Later, the komsomol bestows badges that sparkle modestly and teach the foreign word, initiative. Parades practice walking forward with conviction. The band discovers that brass can wake pigeons. On Victory Day, medals blink in the sunshine like friendly constellations. The city grows quiet at corners. Photographs of grandfathers stand on tables, the past cleared of crumbs for them to sit. And even children understand by instinct where to put their hands. New Year's Eve isn't merely a date, but an architectural renovation of the living room. The tree arrives and stands on a stool as if giving a press conference. Tinsel climbs carefully. Garlands conduct socio-cultural exchanges with the curtains. The famous salad bowls take the field like veterans. Tangerines perfume the apartment in a citrus policy nobody objects to. Dead Morose, Grandfather Frost, knocks with the confidence of a myth who pays his own utilities. Sparklers write calligraphy in the air that means we made it. The television orchestra counts down with strings that know their duty. Midnight happens. Glasses meet and ring like polite bells. Outside, snow improves everyone's posture. The first morning of the year feels like a preface, and the rug collects the usual pine needles, which will be found next July and considered delightful at night. When the city has put out its lights in a sequence you could graph, the little dramas of daily order go on. A janitor's broom writes ovals on the snow. A tram dings as if politely declining an invitation. Bread cools on the counter. The crumb learns the weather while nobody watches. The internal passport sleeps on the shelf, folded to the page that knows your middle name and the year your hair decided its current color. Jars in the pantry settle, glass creaking in the temperature change, as if they're remembering summer's diction. The hallway light on a timer clicks off 7 seconds earlier than yesterday. The neighbor's radio murmurs into silence. The cat patrols an aisle of darkness like a tiny and satisfied Minister Dot. No one needs to hurry here. The city will still be here when you wake, still brewing tea in kitchens that speak for whole families, still measuring days by tram wheels and stairwell bulbs. The same bowl will appear without fanfare because the same soup still tastes like dignity. If your eyes are heavy, let them close. The kettle won't mind waiting. It has done this before. It will do it again. The stamp in the passport will remain where it is, exactly the size of a stamp and exactly as powerful as a place to belong. Somewhere a train whispers past and writes a thin silver line under the day. Somewhere a cupboard door opens without squeaking because someone oiled the hinge last autumn and noted it on a scrap of paper. When sleep arrives, it pulls the blanket as carefully as any grandmother and tucks it under with that precise, habitual, tender efficiency the whole country knew by heart.